Welcome to Adulting Decrypted. We are your hosts.
I'm Gene, and I'm starting my first year of college.
I'm Ashton. I'm a music performer, composer, and educator.
I'm Gideon, a high school senior.
I'm Roscoe, the dad. Those are my three sons, and this is Adulting Decrypted, where we discuss ways to become adults and the things we need to know to be successful at life. Today, we're really excited to have Jake Strack from Mingle with us today, and he's going to share some details about how to be an adult. As a serial entrepreneur, we're really excited to have him on the show and teach us more about our entrepreneurial spirit. As everybody knows, as a listener, that we all like to create and develop, and we're excited about to find a common soul. Jake, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I'm Jake Strack, COO and co-founder of Mingle, which is Mingle, no E. We're a video conferencing application that we're looking to revolutionize the way people connect online. I like to say that we're bringing the promise of making the world a smaller place that was promised by the internet back in 1988 or the late 80s.
When Al Gore invented it, right?
And when Al Gore invented it, yes, exactly. And I think that we have the capability to actually deliver on that promise because what we need is face-to-face communication, and Mingle allows for that.
You know, we love it. We've talked a lot about how we're losing some of that. There's so many transactional relationships, and we're missing out on some of that connectivity relationships. So that seems like a really neat technology.
Thank you. Yeah, we hope so.
Yeah, you were talking with us about the concept just before we started, and it actually, to me, it's like, oh, I think I'm into that. I think I could use that. Because I think one thing that happened after COVID is definitely a loss of a lot of human connection. In a lot of ways, where we went to rely on technology, but the technology infrastructure didn't really facilitate the social lifestyle that I think humanity craves in a lot of ways.
Did you guys notice that afterwards in the events, when you went out to events and started meeting with people again, we all reverted back to fart jokes because we didn't know how to talk to each other anymore? It was I was sitting in a bar outside and everybody's smoking, and I just noticed that everybody started reverting to those childhood jokes because we literally didn't know how to talk to one another. It was so weird.
It's crazy how fast that skill needs to be rebuilt.
And sure. You know, it's interesting. It is a common ground. The kids were just talking. My daughter is a school teacher now, and there were some sayings you guys had as kids that were still active in the school, and they're like, "This is the first time you've ever heard of?" And she's like, "No, this is been around for as long as I've been around elementary school." I can't remember what they were right off the top of my head. You guys got this?
They were Bill Nye quotes.
Oh,
where it's like
the Bill Nye
Bill
jokes.
Nye, the science guy, but you like fill it in with different things.
So it doesn't surprise me, Jake, that we go back to what we're comfortable with, all right? What we know.
Well, you know, a fart joke always delivers a good laugh.
That's true. That's true. Potty humor's still alive and well at the Allen household.
I default to dad jokes.
You've earned it.
I heard a great one today that made me bust up laughing. Yeah, it was milk is the fastest liquid because it's past your eyes before you even see it.
Nice. That is a good one.
I'll admit that took me a second, but you know, I got there.
You got there.
Well, yeah. Hey Gideon, when does a joke become a dad joke?
When's that?
When it's apparent.
No, I got that one faster. A lot faster.
I would hope so.
So, Jake, you're visited as we visited a little bit. You mentioned that you've had quite the career to get to where you've created Mingle. Can you share with the listener and let the boys ask you some questions about entrepreneur and the road to get to where you've got? And it might not be the straight path that we all envision.
Yeah. Well, you know, along the way, you make a lot of mistakes, and it's really interesting when I'm now 42. I'm pretty successful. And you look back at it and you realize that whole time you thought you looked up to people that were me or people that are CEOs of large companies or even people that work at like Pentagon. Now I realize that when I've talked to these people, nobody knows what they're doing, which is kind of a scary thing, but it's also relieving, especially if you were younger, to understand that nobody knows what they're doing. And so my background is I started my career as an operations manager for this company called Swamp Tech, which did evaporative cooler service. And I eventually became the owner of that company. I took a second mortgage out and bought it. And that's how I started my entrepreneur life.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you're getting ready to buy that and take out that second mortgage and really kind of buy in, did you buy into that? So I bought a zoo, 30 seconds of crazy insanity mindset, or did you spend months calculating it and trying to figure out your risk ratio? Where do you fall on that line?
Well, it was an opportunity, and I knew it was an opportunity. I had worked for the company for long enough. And so the whole story is my stepfather had purchased the company for a place for his kids to work. I came on as the operations manager, and he was a CPA, and he was one of those finger on the pulse guys. He had to know what was going on, and he was super stressed out one day. And I said, "Hey, Pops, what are you looking to get out of this thing? Like, what's your motivation?" And he goes, "You know what, honestly, I just want what I put into it." And we had already 2x or 3x the size of the company by that point. So I went, "Well, that's a no-brainer. I'll buy it off of you, and I'll figure out how." And so I went and figured out how to get the money to buy the company off of him.
You know what I love about that is that when you started as the operations manager, that wasn't your intent necessarily to buy that company. You were in there, you were working, and then all of a sudden you're like, this is kind of a cool business. I could see myself doing this, as a job. And then you pursued that opportunity. So I think a lot of times we get to work and we start thinking about all the things we hate about our job or the things we can't change. But instead you kind of said, okay, what's the opportunity? So thank you for sharing that. I think that's good for us. It's not always outside of where you're at. Sometimes it's inside of where you're at, and you can find that chance.
I mean, isn't it the joke that the man makes plans and God laughs?
You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Yep, that's why I heard it. Yep. I do believe that.
I like the way you say it better.
I've had a few more years of practice. I'm 50, so you'll get there.
You don't have that much on me. I turned 43 tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
So I got into that, and it was really a no-brainer because we had already grown 3 times the size. And then when I took it over, it's almost like the floodgates opened, right? Because I was able to finally do all the things that I thought were best. And the ego trip that comes with that when you 16x a company and you take over 98% of a market is absurd. Nobody can tell you what you're doing wrong. It's really difficult. But at the same time, you're also in this stage of imposter syndrome. I remember when I finally had to make the choice that what I'm playing with is Monopoly money. And I pretended that I was playing Monopoly instead of actually playing with money, because it was just so much easier for me to live my normal life and come over here and then spend money the way I needed to spend money for a business and to take advantage of the opportunity that came. Even when 2008 hit and everybody pulled back on advertising, I went more in. I went, okay, that's when I should it's going to spend better if I take over. So I was very risk averse. I jumped into things head first. And that's really what got me into my first mistake. And my first mistake was not accepting the beast for what it was. I had a very successful company. It was seasonal, so I had to get rid of people. I had 32 employees at one point, but I kept trying to hold on to my employees. I kept trying to build a bridge and start another company. And that's where it started to kind of fall apart. If I had really looked at it and went, you know what Swamp Tech is it's a seasonal company, I would have taken, instead of putting 80 grand into TV advertising, I would have put that into training and been able to churn people out real fast. But I was at a conference and I was listening to somebody, the business instructor from the U of U, who had started something like 100 businesses. They did a panel and I raised my hand and I'm like, hey, what should I be spending on advertising? He gave me the generic answer of, if you're a growing company, you should be spending 8 to 10%. And I went, well, that's a lot of money. So I might as well do TV advertising, because I have to. And that was a mistake. My situation did not apply to what he was saying. And that just goes to show you, once again, he gave me the textbook answer, but he didn't actually give me the right answer because he didn't know what he was talking about in my situation.
Right. What's interesting about that is you said was you're growing a business to 16x. And I don't know if you guys know what that means. 16x when he throws that number out. Do you guys?
That sounds like it's 16 times more.
That's it. He's grown his sales by 16%. So if it was $1 million in sales, he's now doing $16 million in sales. Am I capturing that flavor right?
Yeah.
So you said originally that when you were making that kind of money and having that kind of success, nobody can tell you anything. And so I found it interesting that the UAU guy, you're sitting there going, there is one question I do have. And then he told you the wrong answer, and that's when you jumped on. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just think it's interesting that sometimes we hear the expert's advice, but we don't understand the expert's perspective. He did 100 companies. He knows what he's talking about. But does he know what I need to do? I'm not saying question everything, but check it maybe with your gut. Or when did you know it was the wrong decision? Were you well down that path?
I would say I would have probably been able to recover from that one, and we would have been okay. I will say that the positive to that is our name became the name for swamp coolers in Salt Lake City. We own 98% of the market.
Oh, that's huge.
Before we sold, which is a massive a massive amount. And there were other issues. Like I said, I didn't accept it for what it was. I did things like I started Christmas lighting and I tried to get into that. You would look at me and go, hey, he's successful. He knows what he's talking about. But I didn't know how to technically scale a business. I had never scaled before. I barely had just started a business. And it's one of those things that the combination of the decisions I've made were ultimately the reason why it failed. And honestly, one of the things that you learn in business as an entrepreneur is that if you can't step away from the business and have the business run, you don't have a viable
You have
business.
another job, right? I was telling my
Yep.
wife that I've had a couple good jobs that I've called my own business. As a consultant, it's all hinged upon what I go in and fix and do and improve. So I like that. I think that's good advice to us.
And so I think I just told my kids that I was recording a podcast and then yelling in the background, which is
All
fantastic.
good.
But ultimately, it was a combination of things and not accepting it for what it was and not really, honestly, like I said, not knowing what I was doing. Near the time, so I had a lot of personal things happen. I had my brother and his wife and their 3 kids commit suicide, which was international news. My wife left me at the time, and I was also dealing with repressed memories from childhood abuse. And I, at that moment, realized something. I said, I'm the biggest hurdle for the company, which was actually kind of an interesting moment for me, was realizing that I'm the one holding us back. And I could clearly see it because I was in the state I was in. And so I went, okay, you know what? Let's hire a CEO to take over for me. And if I'm hiring a CEO, I got to pay him year round. So therefore, we probably have to get into heating. Let's go ahead and do that. And so I got a CEO. We worked out a deal to get our funding for our first year of heating a week before our heating department was supposed to open. Our investor pulled. And so we were dead in the water. And then we sold off the pieces, right? It was just like, well, you know, we did our best. We tried our best. And so we sold everything off.
So I kind of wanted to ask about this while you're talking about this whole thing, because you were in this situation where you felt like you're the biggest fish in the pond, right? And imposter syndrome is something that I think about frequently. So like in the moment, or even looking back on that now when you're bringing in another CEO, were you aware of the feelings of imposter syndrome? Did you take a lot of consideration into those about the decisions you made at that time? Because it sounds quick in a story. I was going to say getting successful so quickly, but that's not always how that feels. It's just an interesting thought to me that to be the biggest fish and still be like, I don't know what's going on.
Well, it brings me to one of my favorite thought experiments of all time, right? Is now let's just imagine for anybody who's listening, I'm going to write the number 1, and then I'm going to write a lowercase l, and then I'm going to write an uppercase I. And they all look the same, right? And it's not in that order is what I'm writing it. If you ask me why it's this way, I'm going to tell you it's because nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
We claim to know what we're doing. We might have a good idea, but ultimately we don't know. I think when you humble yourself in that way, you realize that even the top CEOs and the C-suite people, when you get into a conference room with them, they may be experts in an area, but they still don't know what they're doing. They're just really good at pretending they do.
And that's something you probably would draw comfort from then in the position that you were in.
Absolutely. Well, and even in my position now, I mean, I deal with people I've dealt with a lot of C-level people in my time. I've done big data health before this, and I was dealing with doctors. I was dealing with people that were way more educated than I ever had been. And they were some of the ones that helped me realize how much that's true, that people just don't know what they're doing. They might know something, and that's okay. But if you're a child and you're looking at this, what I recommend is by knowing that, you know that means that you have that freedom to step into something that you don't know how to do and work on it. And you know what? Honestly, fail. Just keep failing at it because you're going to learn. It hurts when you fail. You stub your toe, you figure out that you're not going to kick the side of the stove anymore. You touch the stove and you burn yourself, you learn.
Yeah.
That's failure, right? And that's how humans are meant to work. And that's how entrepreneurship works. It's like test something out. The hesitation of trying to know before you execute is going to destroy your success.
Yeah. Well, taking comfort in the fact that you're not infallible, therefore no one else is. So you can just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very freeing mindset. And I would have to echo that, Jake, as somebody who's been in a lot of big rooms. And I tell people, I don't know that I'm a conspiracy theorist as much as I believe that people are promoted to their highest level of incompetency, and then that's what we get. And so everybody's like, no, it's a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, okay, maybe, But the reality is, I think most people are just not as good as we think they are. You know, they put their pants on one leg at a time, and, you know, they have to do their hair or not, if you're like me.
They're still fixing their hair in the mirror if they see themselves.
Yeah,
you know, like, have you ever heard, do you know Hansen's razor? Have you heard that? Hansen's razor? Anybody know what I'm talking about on that? So razors are things where I believe it's Greek, and hence the most popular is the simplest answer is often the correct one, and that is Hansen's razor. There's this one called Hamlick's razor, which might be my favorite. And it is do not attempt to describe with malice that can be described with stupidity.
Oh, I like that. That might be the tagline.
Right.
That might be the tagline of this episode, right? Because if you look at that as saying, hey, most people aren't out to harm me. They don't either know any better or they're stupid. Either one of those are freeing thoughts, you know, and they just don't get it. And someday they'll go through these crises where they get knocked off their success pattern or go through their trials. I like that.
Well, and even let's take it internally too. What about the situation where we beat ourselves up over things that there's no way we could have known, right? We keep ourselves up at night worrying about how we harmed someone. But really, honestly, the smartest thing you can do and the best thing you could do for ever harming someone or a perceived harm to your family or whatever is to learn, right? Is to develop and learn from what just happened, right? It's part of the reason, like I say, why Mingle is so important, because if I'm talking to you face to face, if I say something that hurts Ashton's feelings, I'm going to see that. I'm going to feel the mirror neurons are going to hit me, and I'm going to feel that pain. And so now I know to correct that answer. But now if I say something and it makes Gideon smile and happy, I know that I just did that. So now I'm going to adjust the way I communicate and the way I am to develop a better communication with the people that are around me.
And it sounds like Mingle allows you to reach out to that individual, right? That's one of the neatnesses of the app, right, or the tool.
Hello. If you're listening to this right now, that means you're currently listening to an episode of Adulting Decrypted. And let me just say thank you. My name's Ashton, one of the hosts of Adulting Decrypted, and I wanted to steal a quick second of your time to do a shameless little plug. If you've listened to our podcast for any sort of time, you know that we talk about a bunch of different stuff all about adulting. Because our goal is to help individuals in this task we call adulting. Now, we have just revamped the way that we do this. If you go to adultingdecrypted.com, you can see all of our episodes sorted out by category. We've sorted it into financial, practical, emotional, social, and things just for fun. So, if any of those categories are of particular interest to you right now, you can go onto the website, look through there, and see all of our episodes that correlate with that specific thing. This website's completely free to use. It's just another tool for our listeners to find things that are more important to them now. So, for example, if I was looking at it, I'd scroll through and say, hey, you know what? I want to see what the Adulting Decrypted crew has talked about socially. Well, one of our first episodes, Season 1, Episode 3, How Do I Talk to People? That's where we talked about all about how to talk to people. So if that's something you want right now, you can go find that right now. Also in this one, Season 3, Episode 15, The Power of a Humble Mediator, where we talked to one of my old bosses about his business as a mayor, also as a small theater owner. Some really cool stuff. So, if you're looking for a better way to organize through all your self-help podcasts, try adultingdecrypted.com and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah, so imagine you're in a room with 20 people and you see one person you want to talk to. You can click on them and it'll cluster to them. And now you're in a separate little conversation and everybody can see in the venue that you're clustered. So they can come join you guys or they can go do their own. And so it looks just like the real world. So think when I walk into a venue in the real world, I see a bunch of people and I see people clustered together. That's how Mingle looks. And then I can click on those clusters or I can click on that individual. And so it allows for that real communication and that real free flow.
And as an individual who might be involved in many different circuits, you could jump over into one and say, hey guys, that was fun getting to know you. I'm going to go bounce over here. And as somebody who's an introvert, maybe might stay in that one cluster with real deep conversation, a meaningful conversation to them. That's neat.
Yeah,
Well, I think a lot of
precisely.
what we're mentioning about, and this might be too, I don't know if this is a good question or not, but we're talking a lot about like how, like interacting with people and recognizing people's situations and things like that. With Mingle, have you guys thought about stuff like the Apple Vision stuff? Like, are you going to have a situation where people are going to be in person chatting with each other now? Or is it more of just a room to room?
I mean, it's a good question, and I do like it's not. You were going to say that. I don't know if this is a dumb question, and I'll tell you right now, there's never ever a dumb question. There's dumb answers, and there's even
But
dumber
it's not
people who give
malice.
those dumb answers. But it's not malice. It's just stupidity. What I can see happening with the way it's set up, and we're kind of betting the opposite direction. Mingle is betting more on a simplistic two-dimensional computer screen, but it is possible to use those same kind of technologies to where I'm there with AR and I have my goggles on and I can see these little bubbles and I can connect with people that are there on their computer or that are there in person, right? And so it can kind of blend that communication, but that's down the road. By that time, I'm hoping that I've sold the company and that's somebody else's problem.
Fair. So do you find the most joy from building stuff then? Building stuff to sell it? Or is it more of like just any passion project that you get? It's kind of fun to just work on.
I wish I lived in a world where I could just ideate all the time. Ideation for me, solving problems is, I mean, I have a pitch deck that has 85 inventions in it because I have to write them down. And if I don't, then it keep me up at night. But what I'm learning more and more is that I should stop falling in love with good ideas and I should start falling in love with difficult problems.
Wow.
Like, and the reason being is because if you really, really start to research problems, then you can actually bring about a solution that's powerful. Ideas, once created, are always looking for a problem to solve. I think you start on the problem side and you're going to do a lot better. And for anybody that wants to study that a little bit further, look at like the mom test. It's a really good book about how to solicit advice from your mom without getting her to lie to you about your idea.
I'm gonna have to check that out because that is definitely something that. Well, so a little bit about me is I like to write music and stuff, and part of the challenge of showing music to your friends or your family is everyone feels obligated to be like, oh yeah, that's awesome.
Or we don't know any better, in all fairness.
They're like, oh yeah, cool, sure, why not?
I told Ashton when he did marching band, I'm like, did we do good or did we do bad? You know, I'm like, I'm not smart enough to know.
I've been lucky enough. Every time I show my mom stuff, she's always like, yeah, why is that happening though? What about this though? And it's been good because I'm like, sweet, thanks.
Try to live with it for 30 years.
That's great.
I mean, I love you.
You know what? They just challenge you to be better. Totally. That's how it works. Those, you know what? Honestly, those are the best people in the world for you. Like for any entrepreneur, somebody who can. What I like to say is suffocating the baby in the crib is the best possible thing you can do. And I know that sounds awful, but what I'm saying is I just presented you with my ego. Here's my great idea, and I'm so excited about it. Crush my hopes and dreams, please. Because if you can crush them with your words, that means it's not a good idea.
Wow, that's so strong.
Yeah.
I mean, it just gives you a different idea to look at, right? So I've had a pet project that I've hidden for a while because I didn't know where I felt. You know, I wasn't ready for that ego to be crushed, right? So I've been very careful. That's powerful to think about.
Well, and how much time did you save me? And guess what I just did? I just failed. And then I learned, and now I'm adapting. So if I'm trying to solve this problem and I come up with an idea and I bring that idea to somebody and they murder that idea, then I failed. I learned. I go back to the problem and I keep trying to solve the problem. It doesn't mean that I stop, but I'm focused on that instead of the solution that I love. My ego over here, the problems over here.
Well, I always like to say, like, when it comes to conversations, not about what is right, but more as who is right and what is best for us. Because when people get to the what is right phase, they don't allow their ego to be crushed. But would you say that lesson came to you going back to the swamp cooler business? When you were in that phase, do you think you still held that same perspective as you do now? Or did that come over time?
No, I was still very egotistical even after the company was gone. I thought I knew business. I thought I was a salesperson, which I realized I wasn't. I just happened to own a niche. And I got humbled quite a few times after that. Like I thought I knew what I was talking about and I would try something and I realized that I didn't. I'll give you examples. I fell in love with the EDM scene at the age of 35 after I sold off the company and got divorced. And I started throwing events because it was like, this looks pretty easy. I've run businesses for years. And honestly, I lost money constantly throwing events. And it is really difficult to be successful at throwing events. And I thought I was just going to come in there and it wouldn't be a problem because I knew business and I was going to be able to do something similar to what I had done in the evaporative cooler market, which was to change the market, just tweak it here and there and actually make something that works better and people would show up. And trying to get in that market, trying to get into entertainment, it's not the same. And so I got humbled. I realized real fast that, yeah, I don't know how to mobilize people. I don't know how to mobilize a big group of people to go to an event. I don't know how to make that happen. And most people would say that I probably wasn't unsuccessful at that. I mean, my event group, we did end up getting 600 people to the middle of the desert for a music festival, but ultimately that still didn't pay the bills. It was like, and so you look at these other guys that are doing it and they're paying their bills with doing shows and you're like, I'm lost. I can't even figure out how they're pulling it off. It was through those times of failure again and again that kind of humbled me and allowed me to learn. And I'm telling you, if you start out with humble and you start out, I don't know what I'm doing. And when you fail, you're like, that's not a bad thing. That means that's my opportunity to learn. Then you're going to get a lot.
Sorry. I'm going to cut you off real quick. I think that's got to be some of our own mental game, though, is to be okay with that failure, because it's not even in the outside world. Because I look at something that you try and go, well, I didn't even perceive it as a failure. Right, I didn't perceive that interaction or that thing you tried as a failure as the observer. I'd just be like, oh, that's kind of cool. At least you tried it. At least you put yourself out there. But me internally, I might have said, oh, I failed. And then to your point, I chew it up all night over and over and over and over. Instead of saying, hey, I failed. That's cool. What lesson did I learn? Or do I get out of events altogether?
Well, and for me, the interesting conversation that comes up there is, I haven't found the word for it yet. I was trying to find it as you were talking through there too. But is finding the line between humility, but then also not maybe self-deprecation. Because I know for me, when it comes to, I know I can't do that thing, a lot of times instead of being a creative force of like, I can't do that thing, let me figure that out, it becomes more of a, I can't do that thing, I don't know how to do that thing. And so, meh, And so, like, finding a line where humility breeds that desire to fail.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's humility in the idea that I don't know. I can't tell you that I know that. Humility should never be, I can't do that. I don't know that, but I can do it. I'll figure it out. I'm tenacious. That's one of my, if you looked at my top 3 values, that's one thing I value the most is I'm tenacious. I'll figure it out eventually. You're not going to get rid of me that easy. But it's so I can do it. I just don't know how to yet. And I don't know it yet. And that's the humility, is staying in that space of not knowing and being coachable and learning from what's coming your way.
A quote from Thomas Edison where he says, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I found 1,000 ways the light bulb doesn't work.
It's a good one. I like Thomas's one. Although, didn't he just steal the light bulb?
If he stole the light bulb, then he can steal the quote. I don't care.
Yeah. You know what? He can have it. He stole the light bulb. I'm sure the person who came up with the quote wasn't too angry about it. They're probably more angry about the light bulb being stolen.
Gideon, as the youngest member, does this resonate with you? Any thoughts on it?
About which part?
Just the whole concept of failure, or the learning as you go, or people are genuinely don't have the best answer for it. Because how many times have we said, "Oh, what are you going to be when you grow up?" "Oh, that's dumb." Well, we never say that. We're like, "Oh, that's cool. Maybe you can." What are your thoughts on any of that?
My brain's been running a lot, and I've been doing a lot of thinking. There's one TED Talk, actually. I'm sure most of us have heard it, but it's the guy doing, I can't remember if it was like 30 or 90 days, but he was like, I strive to fail every single day. So he would try something hard. He's like, the first day, I'm going to ask somebody for $100 because he knew he would fail. Like, he knew he'd fail, and it was actually on rejection. But the idea is the same, that the more you do it, the less it feels like failure, and the more it feels like learning. My brain went to that, and I thought it was kind of interesting.
Thank you for the share. That's great. Because really, this conversation is, Ashton's following it, and he's, it's making sense. He's like, hey, this is where I'm at in my journey. But we got to remember those listeners that aren't there, right? What do they get from this feeding? What do they take away? So I appreciate your insight to say, hey, rejection, failure, you can lump it kind of all together. I'm afraid to ask the pretty girl out. I'm afraid to whatever, go to the gym. I'm afraid to dance in the rain. I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid to dance because of lightning, but
I always tell my kids, but I don't think they listen, is like if you,
man, how
you
many
don't
times
ask, the
have we talked
answer's
about
no.
that?
That's a good one.
If we just ask, we got so many cool things when we'd say, hey, can we do this? And people look at you and go, I've never been asked. Or we pretend like we know what we're doing. We found that to be the easiest way to get away with stuff.
Me and a group of my friends have talked about hiring people to pretend that they're Secret Service people or bodyguards, and have them roll up in a black SUV and walk into like a club or something and be like, hey, Jake Strack's on his way in. Where do you want him? And see where they put us. And then, like when I show up and I come with my entourage, they're like, oh yeah, we got this room over
I'd do
here
it
for you.
if you want someone. I'd help. I think that'd be awesome.
I also volunteer to be a bodyguard.
I don't think I'm big enough, but I'll drive.
Perfect.
A car.
Well, we'll need multiple cars.
It's got to look real.
But ultimately, that would prove my point that nobody knows what they're doing, right? Because if I showed up and they put me in a room, that would really tell them.
That's awesome, especially if we do something like the Eagle has landed. Well, that's great, man. I really appreciate the conversation, and I know I've learned a lot. And Jake, I'll be honest, I could talk to you all night, but we need to be conscious of the listener and the time frame of our episodes. So thank you so much for jumping on and talking about your failure, your success, what you're doing with Mingle. Any thoughts that if it was like, hey, this is, I don't want it to be like too dark, but like gravestone, or what would you want to make sure gets passed on from your message and your growing and your learning?
Enjoy it. Enjoy the failure. Enjoy the journey. It's a blast, man. Like if you're not failing, you're not having fun. Get out there and get beat up and learn. It makes life so much more entertaining.
That's a great way to finish. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for jumping on in such a last minute. Really appreciated it. Thanks for spending time and teaching the boys some stuff. Guys. It's the power and your passion about it is contagious. We could bottle this up and share it every day and not get enough of it. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. And I love your guys' podcast premise. I like the idea of having your kids on here and teaching decoding adult, because ultimately that's probably the most important thing we can do is teach the younger generations how to navigate a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's powerful. So thank you.
And listener, just as an extra heads up, if you would like to share your stories about failure or trying something new or entrepreneurship, we would love to hear about them. And you can send us anything through our social medias, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We have a Reddit that is awesome to add to, and our email, of course, all that can be found on our website. So we'd love to hear everything about and respond. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adulting Decrypted. We really enjoyed having this week's conversation, and we hope you did as well.
If you ever want to comment on the topics, you can send us a message to our website, adultingdecrypted.com, our email, adultingdecrypted@gmail.com, or through our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts at adultingdecrypted.
If you have any topics for the show that you would like us to talk about, or if you are a parent and want us to talk about something your kids should know, send us a message on any of the accounts mentioned. If you'd like to be a guest or have an idea for someone you think we should have on our show, feel free to send us an email detailing your thoughts to adultingdecrypted@gmail.com. Adulting is teamwork.
We have merch. If you want to show off your Adulting Decrypted pride, check out our website, adultingdecrypted.com, or our partner website with shop.spreadshirt.com/adulting-decrypted.
Lastly, if you enjoyed the show, please consider supporting us on our Patreon at Adulting Decrypted. Along with the benefits that come with our Patreon, and trust us, there are some pretty good ones in there, you will not only be helping us continue in the effort to make great content, but you will be part of a community of individuals all trying their best to adult.
We appreciate you listening, enjoying, and leaving your positive reviews. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adulting Decrypted. We really enjoyed having this week's conversation, and we hope you did as well.
If you ever want to comment on the topics, you can send us a message to our website, adultingdecrypted.com, our email, adultingdecrypted@gmail.com, or through our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts at adultingdecrypted.
If you have any topics for the show that you would like us to talk about, or if you are a parent and want us to talk about something your kids should know, send us a message on any of the accounts mentioned. If you'd like to be a guest or have an idea for someone you think we should have on our show, feel free to send us an email detailing your thoughts to adultingdecrypted@gmail.com. Adulting is teamwork.
We have merch. If you want to show off your Adulting Decrypted pride, check out our website, adultingdecrypted.com, or our partner website with shop.spreadshirt.com/adulting-decrypted. Lastly, if you enjoyed the show, please consider supporting us on our Patreon at Adulting Decrypted. Along with the benefits that come with our Patreon, and trust us, there are some pretty good ones in there, you will not only be helping us continue in the effort to make great content, but you will be part of a community of individuals all trying their best to adult. We appreciate you listening, enjoying, and leaving your positive reviews. Now, the special song from Gene and Gideon.